Let's start with a number. 80. That's how many targets got hit inside Israel in a single stretch of time. Not spread across a week, not dripped out over different days, but 80 military and civilian connected locations struck all at once, from the southern tip of the country all the way up to its northern coast. That's what Iran claims it pulled off in the early hours of March 19th, and whether you believe every detail of that claim or not, what happened next tells you this conflict has crossed into territory that affects a lot more than just the two countries firing at each other. Now here's the piece most people aren't asking. The US and Israel had previously stated they destroyed more than 70% of Iran's missile launching capability. If that number is accurate, how does Iran still manage a strike package this size? Either that claim was seriously overstated, or Iran had weapons stashed in locations nobody ever found. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Either answer is a major problem, because both mean the picture being painted publicly doesn't match what's actually happening on the ground. So let's talk about what actually unfolded, starting with the weapons themselves, because understanding the missile changes everything about understanding why Israel's defenses are struggling to keep up. Iran says it fired 9 ballistic missiles called the Khorramshahr 4 towards central Israel. Most people hear the words ballistic missile and picture something that travels through the air and explodes when it hits. The Khorramshahr 4 doesn't work that way. Each one can split open during flight and scatter up to 24 smaller explosives, called bomblets, across a stretch of land roughly 5 miles wide. So instead of one explosion in one place, you get more than 24 separate blasts falling randomly across homes, roads, open fields, and anything else in that radius. A field analysis of 2 separate strikes found the actual impact zones stretched across 7 and 8 miles respectively. That's not one target. That's a neighborhood. And nobody on the ground has any way of knowing where the next piece of shrapnel is going to land. The missile itself weighs 20 tons at launch, can be ready to fire in roughly 12 minutes, and travels at about 8 times the speed of sound inside the atmosphere. By the time it's approaching its destination, the explosive payload has already separated from the main body, which means any air defense system trying to stop it is now chasing a detached object moving at extraordinary speed with no way to predict exactly where it's headed. That design detail is not accidental. It is the entire point. Israel has some of the most advanced missile defense technology anywhere in the world, and the Arrow system is specifically built to intercept ballistic missiles at high altitude before they can reach populated areas. On paper, that should work. The problem is timing. Those bomblets separate from the missile body before impact, and if Israel's Arrow system doesn't destroy the missile before that separation happens, the bomblets are already free and already falling. At that point, they're small, fast, and coming down from the upper atmosphere. Intercepting them individually is essentially not possible with current technology. A missile defense expert who consults with Israeli defense firms described cluster munitions as a mechanism specifically designed to get around active air defense. The logic is cold, but straightforward. If your opponent has a strong shield, don't try to smash through it. Make the attack too scattered and too fast for the shield to stop everything. And Iran, having lost a significant number of its launchers over months of strikes, has apparently decided that each remaining missile needs to do as much damage as possible. The cluster warhead is the answer to that math, and reports indicate Iran is now putting them on roughly half of every salvo it fires. Real people died in these strikes. 2 construction workers outside Tel Aviv, an elderly couple found just outside their shelter, a 30-year-old foreign worker killed by shrapnel in the open, 3 Palestinian women in the West Bank, the first civilian deaths in that territory since this war began. An Israeli military official said publicly that the country's air defenses are among the best in the world, and then immediately followed that by saying they are not airtight. When a serving official tells you the shield has gaps, the gaps are real, and the casualties on the ground prove it. While the ballistic missiles were coming from the east, Hezbollah was firing from the north. And that's not a coincidence, it's a strategy. Iran publicly acknowledged in early March that these operations are jointly coordinated in real time, which was the first time that kind of direct operational link had been confirmed out loud. Hezbollah has been launching around 100 rockets a day into Haifa, Nahariya, and communities across the Galilee, and it's been doing it in the same time windows as the Iranian strikes. The goal is to force Israel's air defense layers to respond to threats from multiple directions simultaneously, which means the systems have to make choices about what to intercept and what to let through. And some things inevitably get through. Hezbollah is estimated to still hold around 25,000 missiles and over 1,000 drones. Israel has answered with more than 250 strikes across Lebanon and has pushed ground forces south of the Litani River. More than 1 million Lebanese have been displaced, close to 20% of the entire country, and nearly 1,000 people have been killed, including over 100 children. The head of Israel's northern command called Hezbollah's involvement a serious mistake, and then warned that the strikes will continue and their intensity will increase. That is not the language of a commander who sees a quick end coming. Now here's where this stops being a story about missiles and starts being a story about something that touches everyone, including people sitting thousands of miles away with no connection to any of this. Israel struck Iran's South Pars gas field on March 18th. South Pars is the single largest natural gas deposit on the planet, sitting in the Persian Gulf and shared between Iran and Qatar. Iran's president warned of consequences that could, in his words, engulf the entire world. Within hours, Iran responded, not by hitting Israel back harder, but by striking energy infrastructure across the entire Gulf region. Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial complex, which produces roughly 20% of the world's total liquefied natural gas supply, took direct missile hits, caught fire, and energy analysts say the damage could push back any restart of production by more than 2 months. That facility had already been shut down since early March after earlier drone attacks. A Saudi refinery on the Red Sea coast was struck, and that matters specifically because Saudi Arabia had been rerouting its oil exports through the Red Sea to avoid the Strait of Hormuz, which is already effectively closed because of this conflict. Iran figured that out and hit the alternative route. 2 Kuwaiti refineries caught fire. Facilities in the UAE were shut down as a precaution. Qatar expelled Iran's military representatives and gave them 24 hours to leave. Saudi Arabia's top diplomat said, "Whatever trust existed before has completely collapsed." Brent crude oil climbed above $113 a barrel. European natural gas prices jumped roughly 25% in a single day, and are now more than 60% higher than when this war started. Iran's military issued a statement warning that if energy strikes against Gulf infrastructure continue, its own attacks will not stop until there is, in their words, total destruction. That is not posturing. That is an operational declaration aimed directly at the economies of every country that relies on Gulf energy, which is most of the developed world. And 3 Israeli officials told Reuters that the South Pars strike was coordinated with Washington, even as the White House publicly said it knew nothing about it. Both of those things cannot be true at the same time, and that contradiction tells you something important about how fractured the information around this war has become. Pull back even further and the numbers become genuinely hard to absorb. The Pentagon has asked Congress for more than $200 billion in war funding. The U.S. has struck over 7,000 targets inside Iran. 13 American service members have been killed. Iran reports more than 1,400 of its own people dead, nearly a third of them women and children. Inside Israel, more than 5 million residents have spent extended periods sheltering underground. Schools are closed. Parliament is barely functioning. Israel's own health ministry warned people to be careful rushing to shelters, because people were injuring themselves in the scramble to get there. The country's civil defense watchdog declared that northern Israel simply doesn't have enough shelters, and called the situation an urgent danger requiring immediate action. And yet, public support inside Israel for continuing this campaign remains high, because most Israelis describe this as an existential fight, even the ones living underground in reinforced rooms. That gap between physical disruption and collective resolve is one of the most important things to understand about how long a democracy can sustain a war like this. Which brings us to the question that nobody, not Washington, not Tehran, not Jerusalem, has actually answered. Iran was supposed to have lost 70% of its missile launchers and 85% of its air defenses. And it still coordinated an 80-target barrage across all of Israel, while simultaneously setting Gulf energy infrastructure on fire, from Qatar to Kuwait, to Abu Dhabi to Saudi Arabia. Either the damage assessments were wrong, or Iran hid enough capability in enough dispersed locations to survive the entire campaign. Both explanations have severe implications, and neither one has been addressed honestly in public by anyone involved. Oil above $113. Natural gas up more than 60%. The Strait of Hormuz closed. A fifth of the world's LNG supply offline or damaged. 13 Americans dead. 5 million Israelis sheltering underground. 1 million Lebanese displaced. Hundreds of billions flowing toward a conflict with no defined finish line. And not a single government involved has publicly said what winning actually looks like. What outcome would make this stop? What any of them would accept as enough? That silence, from every capital at once, is the most important thing to notice right now.